It's absolutely nothing like the flatlands that is Northeast Ohio. And if you like baseball, not even just Indians baseball, if you like baseball, it's a great trip. From where Goodyear is, I think there's 6 teams and 3 or 4 facilities within about 20 minutes. And downtown Phoenix is about 20 minutes away, and the airport's about a half hour. So it's a great trip, and I highly endorse it.
Okay, let me jump in right there. This public service announcement brought to you by me, J-Rock, host of the show. If you or your business would like to be the official sponsor of the Sports Fix broadcasting live for a week from Cleveland Indians spring training, please email me today, jmyers@thesportsfix.net. Again, just imagine the worldwide reach of broadcasting live from the soandso.com studios here in beautiful Goodyear, Arizona. Bam! Just like that, you can help sponsor the Sports Fix live from Goodyear, Arizona. So make sure you hit me up. Okay, done with that there now. And I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised. I may get an email or two back from that. But anyways, Mike, now you got me thinking, man, now I'm going to have to try to make this happen. Because seriously, I've made plans 2 years in a row and then had to back out on them at the last minute just when, like I said, it gets to be a bit too much, and then other things come up here, and next thing you know, I got side jobs, and all of a sudden, it's easier not to go and to talk about it from Cleveland. But, man, now you got me tempted looking out this window. We're going to have to see about that one. But we've got some time. Indians have, like I said, 43, 44 days until spring training. Hey, before we talk Indians, though, let's talk this week. Baseball in the news. I wanted to ask you, of course, the Hall of Fame ballot came out, and I can't ask you before because we haven't had you on the show in 2 weeks, who you would have voted if you had the magical ballot to put in. But Big Unit not only goes in, as everyone expects, but becomes the 8th highest total number of votes there, as he came very close with 97.8% or whatnot to being a unanimous vote, which is, we were laughing, by the way, Jeff Gorman and I earlier this week, just about the mythical, it can't happen, the unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, and just joking about people do this all the time. Who were the 2 people that didn't vote for Babe Ruth to go into the Hall of Fame, or Ty Cobb, or whatever it may be? When you think about that, who stops the best of the all-time legends from being a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I don't know how you force somebody to vote. That's pretty much breaks the definition of democracy right there. But if you don't vote for those guys, if you don't vote for those guys, I'm not sure you're qualified to vote either. So that's why I say I'm not sure. Not sure you should force somebody to vote, but in the same breath, if you don't, how are you necessarily qualified to vote for some of those guys?
That's what I mean, what you just said. I'm not saying force. I'm saying even on the first ballot, the very first time we're going to put these guys in, how did apparently 2 or 1 or however what the number was there based on the percentage, how did 1 or 2 people convince themselves Ty Cobb's not a first, he shouldn't be here, or Babe Ruth, forget Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth. How did somebody go, you know what? I don't like Babe Ruth. I don't think he should go in the Hall of Fame. That's funny when you think about it,
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the answer is probably vindictiveness for most of them. And,
yes.
I think even, there's guys that don't get enough of the vote, and it's because of their run-ins with sports writers in their career. And, I think, to me, a guy like Albert Belle, I'm not sure if Albert Belle is a Hall of Famer. I think Albert Belle certainly should be on the ballot. The idea that he didn't get 5%, I think, is a shame, and that he's not even on the ballot. And I think there's a good case to be made for Albert Belle. If you sit down and you compare his numbers versus Kirby Puckett's, Albert Belle has better numbers. And Kirby Puckett, everybody thought was a surefire slam dunk, nothing to talk about Hall of Famer. And I think the biggest difference between the 2 of them isn't anything you can find on the back of their baseball card. One was good to the media and one wasn't. And one's a Hall of Famer because of it, I think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And along the lines of what I was saying, too, I was talking to some guys after the show where we were talking about this the other day, and I said, I'm curious if you agree, in today's society, just it's the nature of the world we live in, no matter how great the player is in the future, I think we live in a society where you will never, ever have a chance to get a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, because we live in a world where there's always that one person that will do it just to be the one person that didn't vote. Whether it was, I don't know who would be the next one that would be, maybe Jeter, somebody like that would be highly voted upon. You know what I mean? But there'll be that.
Yeah,
I would
think that Jeter would be the next one that somebody would say, "How can't you vote for that guy?" And
right.
I mean, we had those kind of conversations last year, I think, with Greg Maddux. And now I agree with you. I don't think there'll ever be a unanimous voter or a unanimous candidate to be voted in. But, there are guys that I think, deserve that honor for sure. Like you said, I mean, how do you not vote for Babe Ruth and other guys over the history of time? And I would put Maddux in that category too. And I think there were, if memory serves me correctly, I think there were 16 people who didn't vote for him last year. And, that would be another one to me. In the era, first of all, if you win 350 games in any era, that is, makes you a Hall of Famer and the conversation's over. But in the era that he did it, I think makes it even more commendable. And that 16 people, decided that he didn't quite make the cut, or I'm not sure what their reasoning was. I know, and I definitely can't remember anyone's name, and I think it's been a while, but I think I've heard of voters admitting that they don't vote for anyone the first time because Babe Ruth and some other guys weren't unanimous. They don't want anyone else to be. And to me, some of that is some of the problem with the Hall of Fame and its voting, I guess, is that there shouldn't be gamesmanship inside of a vote, I suppose.
No, you're right. I brought that up the other day, and I said, I was reading something that Jason Stark had put together, and it struck a chord with me as far as, and I get it. The limit, if there's more than 10 you think should get voted in, then that works against guys. But as far as how do people gain and lose, gaining I get, but how do people lose votes and then gain them back the next year and then lose them, the ones that stick on the ballot for a few years when their resume does not change? Nothing about them changes. They're either a Hall of Famer or they're not. And so that gets funny when you see that depending on who else is on the ballot, other votes drop. I don't know. That gets to me. But, talking about Maddux and Randy Jansen, too, by the way, I mean, that's deserving of being in the top 10 of that listing as far as the percentages. I mean, we lived through it. Jeff and I were talking about this the other day, Mike. These are like the first true classes, and you're in the same age group, where you literally saw the bulk of all of their playing careers as your sports watching. So you're now not looking at guys that your dad told you about or guys that you read about on the back of the baseball card, but these are now the guys that you saw. And of course, Randy Jansen, we all got to appreciate him firsthand up front. You brought up Maddux. Indians fans, I wanted to throw this out there because I don't know how many people heard this stat, but now with Maddux and Smoltz and Glavine in together, the Braves became the first Major League Baseball team that can say that they sported 3 Hall of Fame pitchers in the same World Series rotation in 95 and 96. So think about that when we talk about that 95 Indians team and it not being able to finish the job against the Braves. Look at how close they came against a team that ended up having all 3 of those guys go into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, they only 5 of the 6 games did they face Hall of Famers in that series. They got a real freebie with Steve Avery in game 4. A real
and
major letdown. That guy will have to buy a ticket to get in the Hall of Fame like the rest of us. Yeah,
but seriously, think about
that.
No
kidding.
Man.
I think that really says a lot about the quality of that 95 Indians team. And I mean, for sure, the quality of that Braves organization and what they were able to do, in the consistency of making the playoffs year after year after year, even though they seem for some way to only get that one World Series. But
think about that too. Doesn't that really kind of? I've never been one to jump on that train before, but as you now looking in hindsight, and when you see those three guys and that, and you look at who the manager was and all of that, you go, man, how did they only win one World Series? How?
Yeah, no kidding. And I guess without a better answer, to be honest, I think you could make an argument that steroids has a major effect on that because, having the strength to, I think steroids, certainly there were pitchers that took steroids too, and I'm definitely not alleging that any of those three did or did not, and I certainly don't know anything about that. But I think it's fair to say that steroids probably helped the hitter statistically, better or more than it did the pitcher. And I think when you look at Maddox and Glavine and Smoltz, those don't look like guys that were bulking up, to say the least. I think each one of them probably have to run around in the shower to this day to get wet. So I think, a lot of teams, probably were able to take advantage of that. And in a short series, it only takes, a couple big hits here and there, and that changes the series where, obviously their ability to day in and day out win series throughout a 162-game schedule got them into the playoffs and a chance year after year after year.
For sure, absolutely, and that just highlights that even more there with that era. And you're right, that could be a good answer to that too. Here, talking to Mike Brandyberry from DidTheTribeWinLastNight.com. Here, you're listening to the Sports Fix. We're talking a little baseball and the Hall of Fame voting this week as well, along with Smoltzy and Randy Johnson, as we mentioned. Pedro Martinez goes in. Some people I mentioned when we were doing our breakdown the other day, I said, hey, man, he's no doubt a Hall of Famer to me. I thought maybe that with people monkeying around with the vote, I thought maybe that might be a guy that people could justify second year for Pedro Martinez because of some of the other things in his career, but obviously not. He was also elected there first year. And Craig Biggio, who came so close last year. I mentioned that before, how I've seen, not just in baseball, but in different sports, you've seen a guy who will get a vote or two short at his peak of getting in and then never get that close again. And you think, man, if only one person had cast their ballot differently. But they were able to correct that this year as Biggio got in. And Mike Piazza closing the gap, continuing. He's a guy that I see in a couple of years perhaps finally gathering enough votes to get in, but he fell just short this year. But Biggio got in as well this year.
Yeah, I think Ken Griffey Jr. is the only real addition to the ballot for next year that I think is a serious Hall of Fame candidate. So some of these guys that have been picking up speed, I think have a real shot to be added next year. And I think Piazza is one of those guys. You kind of asked me at the beginning, who I would have voted for. I think I would have had 8. I would have had the 4 that would have gone in. I would have voted for Piazza. I would have voted for Tim Raines.
Yes.
Kurt Schilling, and I think my last guy, I would have voted for Lee Smith. I don't know why. Well, I guess I understand the argument, but I don't know why. The way the game has changed, we have just decided that closers are not going to get in the Hall of Fame unless you're like Mariano Rivera. I mean, I read a story the other day that somebody said they didn't think Trevor Hoffman would ever get in, and I find that to be foolish. I think the game has changed, and the closer is a part of baseball and has been for a good while. I think that there isn't like some definable benchmark of saves like there is hits or home runs hurts some of those guys, but I think if there was some line like 500 saves or 300 saves that we all looked at and said, yep, that makes you a Hall of Famer, it would help those guys. But to me, Lee Smith is a guy who, really kind of was, one of the leading closers all through the 80s and really kind of, another one of those guys who kind of helped define that role and make it what it is. So for me, he would be a Hall of Famer. I guess he's a guy that, realistically will probably never get in, as I'm looking at it right now. I mean, he only got 30% of the vote. He's going to have to pick up a lot of speed, but
that's what gets me. It's not just that he's not in, it's that Lee Smith sits around 30% of the vote here, in and out, and I'm like, man, I mean, I could see if he was like where Bagwell, stalling out at 55% or something like that, like able to get 2/3 of the way there, but man,